So obviously, Aimee, I would love to get to know you a little bit more and provide value for the audience. Talk about the brand building, how to do that strategically too. You have a very interesting background. You used to work as a global creative strategy lead at Pinterest, so a big company
Mm.
that we all know. Can you give a little bit more history of how you got involved into marketing?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks again for asking the question. I feel like we've all experienced so much even last year from a marketing perspective, and even I feel like that will be no different in 2024. But yeah, just like a little bit about me, I studied journalism in school, and so always had a love for advertising and copywriting, throughout my career. And that kind of led me to really go into like PR initially, just because that was something that was very, very available in San Francisco, where I used to live. And one of the first jobs that I did was really working with tech firms and tech companies to copyright for them, to get them press and earned media, and really just share their story with consumers and readers in general. So that was something that just was exciting to me and really sparked a lot of interest and love for marketing and storytelling, which kind of led me to my first advertising agency, which is called VaynerMedia. They're still around, which is exciting. And so I worked in the San Francisco arm of that agency as a copywriter. And I think that's really where I always call it like writing boot camp, because I think copywriting in general is very, very different in terms of digital and long form, short form, all of these different things. And I think we've just seen it evolve so much over time, especially as a lot of social platforms like Instagram and TikTok have gained popularity. So yeah, at my time at Vayner was amazing, and really worked on like creating and kind of owning voices for brands such as like Maybelline and Levi's. And then I had the opportunity to head over to Pinterest. So that was kind of where I really took a deep dive into just like in-house marketing, creative, and advertising. And so I was part of an incubator team called the Pin Factory within Pinterest, and helped to almost act as like a small internal agency and help create content, create assets, and really help develop their brand strategies from an advertising perspective on Pinterest. And so that was an incredible, incredible job. And, my time at Pinterest um, was amazing. And I still look at it very fondly. And I was there for 7 years. So a very long time.
Yeah, so would like to obviously get in some of those into nitty gritty and some of the strategies, in terms of Pinterest. Pinterest is a very interesting platform, right? It's
Mm,
it's 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 nothing, it's very visual. It's same as Instagram, right? It's very visual, and you see a lot of the influencers, they're leveraging that. And by the way, as far as the engagement, like ads or just general engagement, like it's doing quite well. So, comparing to
yeah.
other platforms, they're just, looking into your pocket and how much can you pay for that ad, and
Yeah.
placement.
I think the cool thing about Pinterest too is like it's a platform for yourself, right? And for your interests and your dreams and your passions, right? So you're saving content that you're actively interested in, which is a really good trigger for Pinterest to then help define what you want to see in your feed in the future. So I really loved working at Pinterest, because I think it's one of the platforms that just is actually productive play instead of kind of destructive. I think a lot of times we passively scroll social media apps, not with a lot of intention. And so to me, Pinterest is that one safe space that you can go to find inspiration, but then also action as well. You can learn more about a product, you can buy a product, you can do all of these different things that I think Pinterest is perfectly poised to help with.
Hmm. You also worked with the retailers, right? And helped them to craft this effective brand identities on Pinterest, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That was like actually one of my favorite things
yeah.
for the last like 5 years that I was working at Pinterest. I was a creative strategy lead for home decor brands and then also retail brands, so like fashion brands. And so that was really, really fun just because home decor and fashion are so native to the platform. And those are kind of like our two biggest verticals within Pinterest. And so that was really exciting to kind of be able to help these advertisers see Pinterest in a new and exciting way. I think oftentimes a lot of brands and agencies see Pinterest as the place for brand building, which it absolutely is, but then also a place to get consumers actually, across or, through the funnel or whatever we like to call it. It's non-linear now, but get them from like seeing the product or being inspired to actually buying the product or acting upon what we want them to do.
Yeah, so that will be my question. And obviously for fashion, if somebody's into fashion, the Ohio transplant. That's I have to plug that in. Aimee
Oh,
Rancer. If you want to follow
yeah.
her and follow her blog, you're gonna see a lot of fashion stuff there too. Awesome, by the way, I checked it out. So
Thanks.
the thing is here, the question, because not all the brands out there are clothing, and those brands, like decor, clothing, you sell candles, anything, right? Like it's more visually appealing. Maybe it's easier to communicate that message to the end consumer and make that more seamless in terms of the sales process. What about the
Yeah.
brands, let's say, for example, just like us, a selfish question, an event company that's trying to promote an event, like how that strategy can look like and make that as seamless as just a clothing brand can do in terms of just conveying the message to the end user.
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think it's kind of different. There's a lot of variables, right? That influence the answer, right? So I think oftentimes I like to think about what it is I'm trying to communicate first and foremost. Is it, again, an event? Is it a product? And then why? Like, why should a consumer care? Why should they spend their valuable time to act upon something that we're trying to market or message? And I think also because we're just so inundated with advertisements, we're so inundated with just content in general, it's really overwhelming. So again, not only does the product or message need to be clear and succinct, but it also needs to be meaningful. And so sometimes that's messaging in different ways to different personas or people or demographics. Oftentimes that's, revising the creative to look and sound different. And so, basically just having different creative iterations and variations. And then I think, oftentimes to me, it's testing and then iterating, right? Seeing what's working in market and what's not. I feel like that is super important. And I always feel like to come up with a really great strategy, you need to have three things. You need to first do the research and understand the insights and develop the insights so you can like have kind of a why, right? Like, why are you doing X, Y, Z? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? Which then, of course, helps with your strategy and creative strategy, whether that's messaging, imagery, whatever it may be. And then again, like I said, at the end, just measuring that impact, putting it in market and just seeing what's resonating with consumers. And you might actually really be surprised, whether it's like a nuance within a CTA or a headline, or even using a different color version. Yeah, there's like so many different elements and factors that contribute to a brand success when it comes to marketing.
Mhm. How do you feel about repurposing the same content in a different way? It's going to just do a lot of A/B testing, because we as marketers, we sometimes, it's a small company, medium-sized company, we're stuck in terms of those ideas that we can
Mm.
generate. We're looking at this, content calendar, and it's like, oh my God, 30 days, what it can, kind of put together. So do you believe in just kind of reusing the same content, putting a different spin on it? Like, should companies do that, or it's all about kind of catching the next wave and trend?
Great question. I always am the biggest advocate for repurposing your content with purpose and being really strategic with how you repurpose your content. Because oftentimes brands are sitting on a mountain of amazing, valuable content. But again, thinking about your different marketing channels in different ways, right? And so, maybe it is Instagram where you can be a bit more visual first and then storytell in the caption. But we know people are actively scrolling through Instagram very quickly. So using content in that certain way, maybe it's you have a photo that you're posting that works perfectly on Instagram. And then you're like, how do I repurpose that for TikTok or for LinkedIn? And so thinking about different ways there, I think all of the platforms have kind of different positions too. So for me, it's, a lot of these platforms are quite ephemeral. So we need to be as concise and strategic as possible when we are messaging. So I'm a huge fan of repurposing content. I think that's where a content calendar actually is amazing to have and to look at. As a marketer myself, that's what I always, told brands is like, again, the content that you're creating is amazing. Let's work just smarter, not harder. And all we need to do is just tailor some of the creative messaging and maybe some of the assets. But yeah, we can repurpose with purpose and really see what piece of creative is performing well and maybe what platform is over indexing more than others.
Mm. How do you what do you suggest for companies in terms of finding their voice, right? Because a lot of us, we're just trying to chase like this next trend, like what's popular. We're just, because a lot of the decisions that we make, if it's a small or a bigger company, it doesn't matter. We just
Yeah.
see that across the board. We're just trying to go where everybody else is going. And I had so many conversations right now until this point where individuals that are working inside of this company, if it's LinkedIn, if it's Pinterest, if it's many others, right? They have their own agencies. They're talking about really slowing things down and really, finding your voice, right? And being authentic.
Mhm.
That becomes a thing. I think that will become the entire theme of 24 is being authentic, where we have AI and all these different tools, and people find that kind of, there's no proper connection there, right? So what's your advice in terms of finding your voice?
I think it looks different for every brand and different person. Obviously, a corporation is going to have maybe a more buttoned up voice than, say, an individual like myself or you. But I think if you take a step back, really identifying who you're trying to speak to, first and foremost, like who is your audience? And then also think about like what you stand for as a brand, whether that's individually or at a corporate level, right? And so for me, I like to think about like brand buckets or tenants, right? Personal tenants that I like to live by, that I want to be known for. And then I use that as like an anchor to then create my voice, right? So for me as an individual brand, I'm a bit quirky. I live life very colorfully. I don't take myself so seriously. So you can see that reflected in a lot of my content, right? And those are kind of like things that I always think about when creating content is like, am I being authentic to my voice? And I think the similar thing is done with brands, big brands. You have a style guide, you have a big brand book where I always like to do like a column of I am XYZ, but I'm not XYZ, to kind of help hone in on your voice and your brand personality. And as you can tell, Pinterest, again, it was very aligned to my personal brand too. It was like very colorful, helpful, positive, but a brand maybe like Amazon is all about utility and operational excellence. And so that might look very different than, say, a brand like Pinterest.
Yeah. And I see these days what's happening, because obviously we're talking about button down corporative executive that's in front of a video and they're all tense and it's very
Yeah.
serious and it's all about
Thanks.
inclusion and diversity and sustainability, and it's like whatever. Where you get companies, maybe big companies, and again I cannot find an example right now, but they're intentionally dumbing down their content to appeal to people,
Mhm.
right? So, which again, that's I think what we want to do. Maybe it's a strong statement, but we want to appeal to people, right? We don't want to be so serious or take things so serious. And I think that's what made you successful in terms of what you do personally in your brand is being quirky, like being
Yeah.
different, right?
I think there's like times and places to be serious and mindful, especially depending on the topic that you're speaking about.
Mhm.
But if I'm talking about, an outfit that I'm wearing, again, I'm not going to take myself so seriously and use jargon or use like language that feels stuffy just because there's no kind of connection. It's fragmented, right? So I think like there's absolutely times and places where brands can be positive and professional, but also endearing or friendly or approachable too. And I think that's like you need to just those are exercises that you need to have, whether at the brand level or personal level, to identify those kind of like key core elements that make up your brand. So like, for instance, I was really surprised. I think it was yesterday. Um, I believe the IRS in the United States posted a Mean Girls post, and it had like a book in Mean Girls called The Burn Book, and it was all about like IRS flags or triggers during tax season to get you prepared for tax season. And it was just like a really surprising post that I imagine got shared quite a bit, but it just felt like totally and I know what they were trying to do. The IRS is trying to
Content
seem
always
a lot
does
more
well, right?
approachable. Yeah, like they're trying to seem approachable, they're trying to seem helpful or funny,
Yeah.
and it's just a complete like departure from their brand. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. I wonder how long this is going to last. Because you can only have those like meme-esque posts every once in a while, but the levity of the post actually was a really nice contrast, especially for the younger generation
Hmm.
who maybe are not educated on tax season in the United States, right? They don't know how to prep themselves. So I felt like that was like an interesting play, and I'm curious to see their strategy moving forward.
And that's what's missing in educational system overall when you're describing younger people and getting them interested, right? Is this piece, maybe
Yeah.
maybe we should include more memes in a educational system and maybe get more people interested that way. I don't
I
know.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I was just about to say those are things that I really wish I learned in university, right? Or like
Oh yeah.
college is how to select healthcare because we don't have universal healthcare. How do we identify like how do we set ourselves up for success for tax season? How to start a 401k, all of these things in the United States that are just again, these are all systems that were built
Yeah.
very nuanced. They have a lot of nuances and they're confusing and hard to navigate.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see like the younger generations, Gen Z and all of these younger generations, um, really asking these bigger corporations and brands to be like, we need a little bit more relatability. This is hard to understand. Make it easier. So that's something that
Definitely.
I find interesting.
IRS, if you're listening, more memes, please. Continue with the memes. We'll love them. Definitely, because I agree with you on that point. If we just make things, because life is already difficult, right? So just making things
Yeah.
as easy as possible to understand and include some fun along the way, that makes the entire journey more fun as well. So let's say a company, an individual found their voice, right? And those are solid tips that you're providing here, Aimee. So how to build a brand and storytell, because that's another part,
Mhm.
right? Because there's individuals like Pablo Picasso, right, or Van Gogh. Sorry, I think Van Gogh. Yeah, Van Gogh never sold a painting after he
Yeah.
passed away, right? Because he,
Yeah.
he he never knew how to tell his story, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he hadn't had Pinterest at the time, right? Maybe that didn't help. But look, you can be the best. You can find your voice. You can have a great product, and there are companies out there that have a great product, great service, and nobody knows them because they don't know how to
Yeah.
tell their story. So, what elements does the storytelling should include?
Yeah. And I think again, it varies by platform and the type of audience that you're looking for, right? And so there might be different needs depending and different audiences depending on the platform or vehicle, right? So uh for instance, I think, you know, being first a student of the craft of like first, even taking a step back, understanding what you're trying to communicate and share and storytell, right? Is it a product? Is it a service? Is it just your personality, yourself as a brand? Which could obviously you could be a product yourself. But I think that's like the first thing there. And then really understanding the craft, right? So going to these different channels, whether it is social media, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, whether it's Substacks, whether it's websites and blogs, and really understanding and getting some, like doing some market research, right? To see what's resonating, what's not. And then once you kind of, you know, find all of that that data or just like that information, starting to think of themes, right? And identifying themes of like what's working well somewhere, what's not working well, and then translating that into how you apply your brand and how it kind of matches with your brand or what you're trying to say, right? So I think to me, it's like I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses about how to set them up for success on TikTok and social media. And I think, again, it's like really just consuming the content and just understanding the platform first and foremost. I think that was always the biggest barrier or challenge at Pinterest, is that people didn't understand Pinterest because they never went on Pinterest. And so I always like to recommend that if you are spending your brand like dollars, if you're spending money on a certain platform from an advertising perspective, please understand the platform to some extent. And I think the cool part is there's so many different tools and resources now available to brands and businesses who might be on the smaller side. So thinking about that as well.
So how can companies generate those new fresh ideas, right? Just being innovative, right? Because I believe companies would like to, maybe disrupt to some level and stand out, and in that, for that reason, you have to be unique, right? You have to be unique, which again, generate results. Talking about, for example, on TikTok, there's, people, I see, for example, videos, you're not getting more than 200, views per video, because obviously the algorithm treats everybody, and it's like, okay, and they're creating a video of speaking themselves, like, I'm not getting this, use this sound or whatever. And there's like 1,500 people doing exactly the same. And that video has like, 1,500 likes or whatever that is, right? So, that's what individuals do, but that's not unique, right? And there's so many creators, maybe not talking about the big brands, but I'm sure big brands do that too, that they just go and duplicate what else is happening in the marketplace, right? Which might generate results, generate likes, and if that's how you count your success and followers, but maybe it's not really generating in terms of revenue, because it's just like, okay, you get all the likes and that all that is there, but how much is it generating in revenue? Because you're not really being unique in a marketplace, right? So how can somebody find that balance?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, again, it's like I always talk to brands and businesses about best practices, right? And like even these are best practices, in my opinion, are loose rules that work for overarching platforms, but they're not hard and fast rules. They're more like guidelines, right, to adhere to. So even if you're following all of these best practices, there might be nuances in terms of just like what's performing and what's not performing. And I think I always laugh too, because a lot of the content that that I consume from other brands and businesses, they always say that the piece of content that they focused on the least or thought did the least amount of work for actually like outperformed some of like the more technical things. And so I think, again, it is like both an art and a science of like following the best practices, understanding those data points, but then sometimes also just creating content that moves you and that excites you, and that you might are like sometimes you're putting a little too much pressure on yourself for at times. And so again, it's like a delicate balance. I don't know if I have like the perfect formula of things, but I think that's like a really good opportunity for, again, this idea of like measuring performance and testing and iterating to actually see what's moving the needle from a sales perspective, for For instance, I'll give you one example. Things on TikTok now, I feel like now TikTok has like a TikTok shop or an e-commerce like play angle. And a lot of the products do before and afters. A lot of the influencers who are highlighting these products, they're doing before and afters, which is truly like one of the biggest, I think, like opportunities there from a storytelling perspective, because it shows the product in use and then shows like instant gratification. And I think it really taps into like the human psyche and that gratification angle of like, what is the product? What does it do? How are you using it? And what's the result? And it's all within like a snackable video. So of course, I'm seeing, hair curlers and skincare products and rug washing machines all on TikTok shop. And sales are obviously, going up because of that revenue stream.
What will be your advice in terms of picking a platform just in general? Because there's so many different platforms to use, and sometimes what we do, we just focus on a volume, so we just throw things and see if they're going to stick. So in terms of that data, because some of that data might come back, a couple of months from now, right? Something might get viral in a couple of months. So what data should we be paying attention right now as we kind of throwing this content and seeing what sticks?
I think like, again, for me, Instagram oftentimes is super ephemeral. So it really depends on, I think a lot of social platforms have a lot of volatility. You're not in control of your content. So I always recommend that brands have one space where they're not subject to, moving policy changes or product updates or algorithm changes. They have one place, whether it's their website, a blog, a newsletter, that they can own and dictate.
I keep hearing that, yeah.
And then I think also what it's important too is to identify the platforms where and when it makes sense. So for me as a fashion and lifestyle creator personally, that's a visual medium for me. And so I use Instagram primarily, but then also I supplement and repurpose some content meaningfully on TikTok and all of the other kind of channels, especially Pinterest as well. So there I can see if my content is moving the needle, and then I'll just readjust if it's not. And maybe sometimes my end goal is just strictly to put content out there because I'm inspired and I want to create. And other times it might be because I want to drive purchase of a product or drive awareness or, clicks or all of these things.
Yeah. Again, for the visual brands out there, clothing, selling candles, beauty, whatever it is, how do you see AI? I mean, this big topic that's again that everybody's talking about this, especially on LinkedIn. You see these people, use this prompt. No, this prompt is better. Use this software or whatever. So, how do you see this playing in? Maybe you can talk about the pros and the cons of AI, especially for the brands that are very visual.
Yeah, and I think positioning AI as a helpful resource to help optimize your lifestyle is great, right? It's not, to me, it's not a replacement for a person or content, but it's more of a facilitator in the sense of getting the best outcome or output. So maybe I'm trying to brainstorm ideas and I'm using ChatGPT to help me ideate on certain blog posts, or maybe it's something around using Midjourney to come up with a creative mood board or visual to help me as a starting point. Or maybe it's more around the lines of help me make this email sound a bit more concise and authoritative. And I think, again, it is just a way to help facilitate and empower the individual to create the best content, and then not use that as a replacement, but again, to help empower the individual, the human, to, for whatever kind of like channel or medium they're trying to produce, or what product, whatever they're trying to produce, to make it sound and look maybe the best it can.
Do you believe that again, especially for influencers, like we already seen like these articles, and probably you, Amy, seen this as well, that um basically these AI accounts, you know, of girls and bikinis, whatever, like
Yeah.
influencers being created. And I've seen this, by the way, on platforms where they, you know, you can go and learn about different courses for you know, different practices. There are people putting out courses and teaching people how to create these fake accounts. And there,
Mm.
I check the reviews, and I check like there's 5-star reviews, and there's like, you know,
Mm.
2,500 people like already bought it. I'm like, wow, this is, you know. So it seems like, you know, because you see those cases like you know, this fake AI bot, you know, girl got 150,000, and they're getting brand sponsorship deals. You know, brands are throwing money at them. So things are just getting out of the hand, as it seems like, to some degree. So we do believe like the future, if we really step into the future, which again, it's you know, speeding
Yeah.
up as we speak today. Like, do you think some of the brands are going to fully move in terms of, you know, we're talking about thought leader, a thought leader individual representing a brand. So instead of me, there's going to be AI, you know, Martina standing in, you know, in front of the social media and just talking, right? Everything's perfect. Like, you know, these, you see these commercials like on TV, like they're perfect. So that's what, that is what's going to be. Individual, we're making mistakes. Like AI is going to make everything perfect.
Mm.
So do you think that's the future of influencer or brands? I mean, and how is that going to make an effect for the competition, or just like industries overall?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we've seen is, things evolve over time, like maybe not even 20 years ago, but like this idea of like Pinterest perfect, several years ago, or even Instagram, like Instagram perfect, where everything had to look very highly curated and beautiful. That was the trend maybe 7 years ago, but now there's this dire want and need and appetite for more human content, more unfiltered content, more raw and authentic content. And I think Gen Z especially is very, very privy to when they're being sold to, when they're being marketed. Um, and I think consumers aren't dumb. They know these things for the most part. And so I think, again, I think we'll continue to see a need for more authenticity and humanity as AI evolves, because we know like AI will not be going anywhere, but I hope AI will be used in positive ways to help enable and empower people's lives, right? Not replace people and their jobs, but really help to, facilitate and optimize in certain ways. So I think, like, again, we'll continue to see the platforms and user behavior evolve as AI does. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's a beautiful tool in terms of like brainstorming and
Oh
and
yeah.
playing around and being creative. But I do think also there needs to just be stronger and more guardrails from a policy perspective and a legal perspective of like how we're using AI, and obviously policy constraints and controls, and there just needs to be some more legality around it. And I don't think we've really done that yet from an AI perspective. So.
Oh, that's missing a lot. I mean, and that's probably the downside of that. And we're not talking about, you know, robots taking over, but you know, where the good thing is, the bad thing also is going to follow. Where we have AI and all the, you know, I had a conversation with an individual too, where we talked about the cybersecurity and IT aspect of it, and there's so many challenges for individuals and opportunity for companies to solve these, right? So where they provide services and products for that to tackle these issues. But cybersecurity, where companies, where the fake accounts of the CEOs and decision makers inside the company being created. So the attackers,
Mm.
they basically do a thorough due diligence, maybe for a week, for a month, to see the human behavior, to create an avatar based on that, and then the AI voice is calling one of the weakest links inside of the company and asking for a very private data information to extract that information. So I mean, it's
Mm.
crazy. It's crazy. So that's the downside of it, right? So that you know, we're gonna see that in industry, and of course, we, when it comes to the content, or you know, especially avatars, you know, somebody can create an avatar of me, of you, anybody else, and, you know, speak
Yeah.
about something and prove it that it wasn't you. Right. So there's all these challenges that coming up today, but of course there's, you know, all the benefits too. So when you're looking at the industry right now, so as we started the conversation with 24, you know, I'm having a lot of conversations, really enjoying those. Just I'm enjoying the conversation with you today, Aimee, because, you know, there's so many different insights, so many different things are happening in industry. Besides what's happening today, like what excites you the most? That you see happening this year in the marketing.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different things that I think are super exciting in the marketing lens. I think I'm really excited to just continue to see this push for more honesty, transparency, and diversity in our marketing and advertising. And I think, again, that's becoming like the standard, right? We're demanding equal representation, you know, and seeing, you know, people reflected, seeing people like us reflected in our marketing materials, right? And so that is everything from, you know, diverse backgrounds, ethnicities, sexual orientations, ability, like bodily disability, or like bodily abilities, all of these different things. Like, I think that is something that I'm really excited to continue to see progress. And I hope that becomes the standard,
Yeah.
instead of just like an outlier. So that's one thing that I'm really excited by. And again, I think one thing that also I'm interested in is, you know, how, again, like the idea of how AI will evolve and help optimize some, you know, of our marketing opportunities, right? So I think that's interesting for me to even see. It sounds so like general right now, but I just feel like we don't know what we don't know. And I'm excited to see all the tools and resources that develop because of AI or are helped optimized by AI. So for instance, right now there's like, you can write a prompt and it can deliver an entire pitch deck to you or a video, or you can, I mean, there's so many things that AI can do. And so we're again, just obviously a year into the development of ChatGPT and all of these kind of things. We're just scratching the surface. And so I'm excited to see how advertisers adopt the technologies and are not scared by them too.
Aimee, again, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks
Thank
for
you for
providing
having me.
great insights. Again, there's so much to talk about, but, you know, there's so much time available here for us today, as you're running from place to place. So I greatly appreciate the time, energy, everything that you provided today, and I look forward to connecting with you sometime soon in the future.
Same. Thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting.